All right, so I just wanted to share my screen. I hope everybody can see this. So yes, I am Kate Carney. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability. Tonight, we're going to talk about reducing our waste through compost and also green cleaning alternatives. And there we go. So our mission with the Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability is to foster healthy, thriving communities. We want to help to improve quality of life and protect our natural environment. We want to do all these things to help promote sustainability and environmental justice for all of us, because every single resident, every stakeholder, we all deserve to live in the healthiest and most resilient community possible. We do this through lots of ways. Notably today, we are going to talk about composting and household hazardous waste with green cleaning. Let's look to start off with, we'll look at waste here in the county. And in 2016, our municipal waste hauler data showed us that on average, each household in the county produces 8.2 pounds of waste per day and 1.87 pounds of recyclable materials per day. And that's all on average across the entire county. All those materials have to go somewhere. So the recycling goes off to the MRF to be sorted and then turned into new stuff, but everything else has to go to the landfill. And as you can see in this data, that 38% of what is going into our landfill is organic materials. So that's everything from food waste all the way through yard waste and other organic materials. And this is stuff that's actually going to break down. And so we don't really need to put that in a landfill. We have other methods that we can use to dispose of those. We want to always think about things having to do with our waste, whether it's our food waste or it's household hazardous waste or just our regular recyclable waste. We want to think about it with the frame of reference of our 3 R's. And I love this waste hierarchy picture that shows the inverted triangle, because first and foremost, every single thing we are going to get rid of, we want to see if we can reduce that before we're even going to need to get to the point where we would reduce it. And then once we've reduced, we want to reuse, and then finally we want to recycle. And in this reduce category, that can encompass so many different methods and types of waste. So we're going to specifically zero in on food waste. About 40% of all food in the United States is wasted, and 97% of it, so practically all of it, ends up in landfills. We could save a tremendous amount of money in each of our households if we just took some action to reduce that food waste in the first place. We can do things like making a list and shopping specifically for the meals that we're going to make in that period of time that we're shopping for. We can be careful about buying in bulk. Can our household consume all of this product that we're looking at before we're thinking about purchasing in bulk before it goes bad? You know, not everybody's household can consume 8 pounds of strawberries before they go bad. So we want to try to make sure that we're thinking about those options beforehand. And we also encourage people to learn more about categories. So just because something has a sell-by date doesn't mean that if today is the sell-by date, all of a sudden tomorrow that product is going to be bad and it won't be consumable. So understanding the differences between sell by, use by, best by, and expiration dates. And you can find out more information about that through the USDA. They have a lot of information on their website to help you understand the different kinds of date categories. So what do we do with food waste? We can, first of all, we want to reduce it, right? We don't want to have to get rid of more than is necessary. But then we can also look into composting. So if you live in an apartment like me, I can't necessarily set up a compost bin outside. So I would want to look into alternatives. There are companies that are here in Cook County that offer a service where you can get like a big bucket from them. You put your food scraps into that. They pick it up on a regular basis that you've scheduled with them. There is a fee for that, so that may not be a great option for everybody. It's also not available in all communities in the county, but The more interest that companies see, the more widely this will be available. Also, we have options for composting outside or composting with worms inside. So vermicomposting is pretty awesome. You can use containers, the worms stay completely contained. If you're doing everything right, it won't smell bad, and they actually break down the materials really quickly. So that's always a really great option for people like me living in an apartment where I can't have an outside compost bin. So let's get into some of the details of composting. So composting is using natural processes to decay organic wastes into really valuable material called compost. So compost is a soil amendment. It's not a replacement for soil, but it helps to enhance your soil and your plants and your grass and anywhere you decide to add it to. And it's basically, once you compost it, it's like a really high quality organic and free fertilizer for all of your planting needs. And so we want to add things like grass clippings and our food scraps and also our dried leaves, and a combination of all these things as they break down get us that beautiful compost you see in this picture. So what do we need to make compost? We, first of all, need to have a place to compost. We need decomposers, oxygen, water, food for those decomposers. And that's not just food scraps, that's also those grass clippings and those other things. And then heat, which actually the decomposition process can provide that heat. You don't have to add it, which is really nice. So lots of basic things that are available in any outdoor situation. We can help to make sure that all the different pieces stay balanced. Where do those decomposers come from? So first we're going to talk about the critters that are going to help to break down all of the materials. So if your compost bin is on the ground, they're going to come up through the soil and they're going to follow the food source. And so they'll come in naturally from the ground around your compost bin. If you don't have it on the ground, and then also in addition to that, it'll come on your leaves once you've raked your yard and you're adding those to your compost bin. They can sometimes be on the food scraps. They are a part of the finished compost. So if you're going to mix some of that in with your new pile, you'll get some of those microorganisms. And then also from soil. So if your bin isn't directly on the ground, you can add some soil to your compost bin, which is going to help with the balance and introduce some decomposers. So we're going to talk about what materials you want to put into your compost. And it's composed of browns and greens. Browns are the high carbon materials. You get that high carbon from leaves, especially the dried leaves. If you add straw, you can use paper like newspaper or other like craft paper. You can just tear it up. You can add shredded paper if you are a household that shreds paper to protect your identity and information from documents. You can put some shredded paper in there, sawdust. You can put all kinds of different dry materials in there to help break down and provide the carbon that your compost needs. Now, this is going to be the majority of what you're adding to your compost. And it's 75% by weight, not volume. Because if we think about dried leaves, they're really, really light. So you have to put a whole lot in there. So making sure that we're using some other things that can help bulk up the weight of that 75% of browns in addition to your leaves, because at a certain point, you're going to need a really big compost bin to be able to accommodate the 75% by weight of leaves. The other piece of that is our greens, and those are materials that have a high nitrogen content. That is the grass clippings right after you've mowed the grass, coffee grounds, eggshells, different kinds of food scraps. You can even add hair. Pet or human hair is a high nitrogen content material that you can add in there. And that's going to be the additional 25%. And we want to also remember a lot of those things, there's a high water content, so those are a lot heavier. So we want to keep in mind that we're going to have mostly those browns, and we're going to add in with the greens, and we want to keep that balance. So there are some really important things to make sure we're not putting in our home compost bins. When you're dealing with a compost service, like I mentioned at the beginning, that's an industrial process with a really large scale composting situation. So some of these materials can be added to that. But when you're going to do it at home in your backyard, you're going to want to avoid anything that has oil or grease. So that would be any kind of a fried food. You're not going to put that in. That's going to have to go in the trash. Milk and dairy outside of the empty eggshells and meat and bones. You don't want to put any of those things in. Those are things that are going to start to cause smells and attract a lot of pests that you probably don't want in your yard. Different kinds of rodents and other flying bugs, flies, other nuisance pests. Not going to want to put any kind of a pet feces in there. You don't want to put big branches or logs because those are going to take a really long time to break down. So they really need to be, maybe some smaller little twigs. You can break those up. You don't want to put any weeds that have gone to seed into your compost bin because those seeds could potentially survive. And then when you use your compost, you're basically planting the weeds and you just don't want that. Garlic mustard is a pretty big invasive species here in the Midwest. We, lots of organizations, lots of forest preserves are really, and park systems are working really hard to eliminate the garlic mustard in their properties. And so we also don't want to encourage those. We also don't want anything that's diseased or has been treated with an herbicide or a pesticide because that could throw off the balance. That can actually harm your decomposer critters. You could also then transfer those herbicides to what you've added your compost to, and you can cause damage to other plants. And so we just don't want that. Also, pet feces and other kinds of feces, they could have lots of different bacteria and pathogens that could be dangerous to us. So you especially don't want to do that if you're going to be adding it to your vegetable garden. So we just want to make sure that we're putting things in that are good and helpful so that when they come out, we're going to have the best compost available. All right, now water was another one of our needs to have a successful compost. If you keep an eye on it and test it a week or every week, I'd say you want it to be the same consistency as a wrung out sponge. So you want there to be moisture in it, but you don't want it to be too wet. If it's too wet, you can add some browns to it to help soak up some of that moisture, but also you don't want it that way because it's going to slow the potential for the heat, so it's not going to break down as fast. And also it could start smelling. It'll get kind of stagnant and you just don't want that in your backyard. Vice versa, if it's too dry, if it doesn't feel like a wrung out sponge, it's also not going to break down very fast. Those critters need water just like we need water. So you want to add a little water to it and turn or mix your pile so that you can make sure that you have a good wetness or consistency to your compost bin. Air, that is obviously all around, but once you start really adding things to your bin, it's going to kind of compact. So you need to move it around every 5 to 7 days. So you could do that with a shovel, or he's using a pitchfork. You could use a stick, anything you can do to move your pile. There's really awesome bins that like my sister has where it's actually on a stand, and so she just has to spin it and it just turns and mixes the whole thing. So there's lots of options to make sure that you're able to turn your pile frequently so that it is bringing the outside materials to the inside that need to be decayed or decomposed more, because the critters are on the inside, they're generating heat, they're all clustered together, and as they break down that material, they need new materials to be mixed in. And then you also want to allow it to cure for 4 weeks after your compost is complete. It's going to allow the critters to leave and go into your new compost pile. It's going to just give it a little bit of time to just set and be really ready to use on your lawn and garden. We're going to talk about the ways you can use it. So let's talk about selecting a bin. So you definitely want to use a bin if you are in a neighborhood or in a city, in a community that's more residential, because then you can control the environment. You can make sure that it doesn't spread. You can use that as a means to keep some of those pests and those rodents away. You want to keep your bin convenient to your home, but at least 2 feet away, because you want to have some distance between the compost bin, the critters that are there and in there, the need to add moisture from time to time, but you still want to keep it convenient so that you can continue putting your materials in it, and you can put it in a sunny spot or a shady spot. Both of those are great. Like I said, your critters are going to help to generate the heat that your compost pile needs, and as long as it's well tended, that's going to handle itself. And you want to also think ahead, like before you start this process, how are you going to collect your materials in your house? Because while you're in the middle of cooking dinner, maybe you have a handful of carrot peels. Are you going to want to run outside every single time you have some stuff you need to put out there? Or are you going to want to finish making your meal and then maybe put your materials outside? There's lots of options. You can use a bowl and just collect them as you're going about your meal preparation. You can throw it in. There's countertop bins that you can use to collect your materials and then take those out and put them in your compost bin. You can put them into a bag, whether it's compostable or not. You can freeze the materials until you're ready to add them. There's so many options. You just want to make sure you have a plan that works well for you and your family, because we want success at every step. So collecting the materials, getting them into the bin, keeping that compost pile well cared for, and then also making sure that you're able to use those the compost when it's ready. So we want to make sure that when we're placing that bin 2 feet away from any building, we also want to make sure that there's good drainage, because again, we don't want water pooling in the bottom of it. We also want to think about our location long term. So every few years, you probably want to move your bin to another location that's also convenient, because plants are really amazing in how they can thrive and survive, and they will start growing their roots towards your compost bin because there's so much nutrients so densely concentrated in that compost pile that it'll attract those little roots, and it will potentially cause other damage long term. If it's too close to a building, your house, it could cause damage to your structure and those sorts of things. We don't want that. So keeping in mind that every few years we do want to move those bins. So we know that our compost is finished when we really evaluate it. So we want to look at the color. Is it that deep, dark soil, rich soil color? Does it appear to be completely broken down, or are you still finding big pieces of identifiable materials? Are you still finding an eggshell? Are you still finding pieces of leaves? That's going to need a little more time. It's going to smell rich and earthy. It's going to be about the same texture as a good, healthy soil. And it can take anywhere from a hot compost pile is going to take you a few weeks to 6 months or even a year. If you're constantly adding materials to it and not necessarily keeping your balance right, or if you're not mixing it often enough, it's going to take a little bit longer. Also know that compost can continue to break down during the winter, during the cold months. It's just not going to break down quite as fast. All right, so problems that might happen. And these are all things that you might already be concerned about. You might be concerned about smells. Any kind of a smell coming out of your compost bin that is not a rich, earthy smell is something that you're going to want to address. You can take a look at it. If it smells rotten or kind of sour, it smells like ammonia, then you know that there's too much moisture. So you're going to mix it, you're going to add browns, and you're going to let those browns help to take care of some of that problem. If it smells sweet, then you're going to add some greens because it needs more moisture, and you can add some water. Mix it up really well, and then just give it a little time, keep an eye on it, and you should be able to get it back in balance. Pests are fruit flies. You can solve that problem with browns. Rodents, none of us want rodents in our yard. You can make sure that it stays covered. You can use, a plastic container that has a lid, or you can cover it with newspaper. Make sure that when you're adding food scraps, you're really burying those in there and putting more of the browns to the exterior. Ants can be cured with boiling water on the colony, and all the other bugs, you want them because they're helping to break everything down. So the worms and the spiders and the other kinds of beetles, they're eating those materials and breaking them down, and that is a sign of a really healthy compost pile. So not all bugs are bad bugs. All right, so how do we use this compost when we have so diligently taken care of it? We've turned it, we've watered it, we've made sure that we had our 75% browns and our 25% greens, and we've cared for it, then we let it cure for 4 weeks. Now what do we do with it? You can mix it in with your potting soil. You can mix it in, you can put a little layer on top of it in your house plants, in your garden beds. You can sprinkle it across your entire lawn to help give you a lusher green lawn. You can use it as a mulch. You can mix it into your garden beds when you're getting those garden beds ready for planting, or when you're getting garden beds ready for winter. You can do anything with it that has to do with plants and using it like a fertilizer on any kind of plant. You just want to make sure that you're just using a small percentage compared to your soil. Too much of a vitamin is a wasted vitamin. Just like for our bodies, if we overdo it with multivitamins, our body's just going to get rid of it. The plant's not going to be able to utilize too much. So we want to make sure we're not adding too much. All right, so now we are going to flip from composting over to household hazardous waste. And I want to start with household hazardous waste because I think it's important that we have perspective on why we would possibly want to stop using certain green cleaners or other products in our homes. So a household hazardous waste product is it could be corrosive, it could be toxic, it could cause a risk of explosion or fire if we don't take care of them properly. And it's not just the disposal, it's also our storage. So we could have some risky situations in our homes, and we don't want that. And our household hazardous waste materials, they cannot go to the landfill. If we send those to the landfill, they could leak on the way to the landfill, and cause a lot of harm to the environment. And it could also increase the risk of fire and explosion, both in the trucks on the way to the landfill and in the landfill. And so we just want to make sure that, again, we're keeping all of our communities as safe and healthy as possible. So let's talk about proper disposal of household hazardous waste. Again, if we think back to that hierarchy that we looked at the beginning, we always want to try to reduce first and foremost. So we want to limit the number of products that are considered household hazardous waste. We want to limit those when they're coming into our homes in the first place. So we can best reduce and minimize the harm from those products by reducing them. We could use less harmful alternatives instead of using the most hazardous product, and we can do that through a variety of ways. We can do that through making our own household cleaners, which we're going to talk about some recipes in just a minute. We could use the EPA's Safer Choice resource. That's at epa.gov/safer choice, and that can help you if you are have a product that you normally use and you want to find a safer alternative. You can enter that information in, and then their database will help guide you to other alternatives. Earth 911 is a great resource for helping to find disposal locations and the different types of materials that they'll accept. We want to also think more about green certifications. So ecolabelindex.com can help you to get more familiar with green certifications and products that qualify for those green certifications that are more environmentally friendly that you could bring into your home. So you can find the safest and best alternatives that work for your home, your family, your lifestyle. Right. So let's think about cleanliness. We know that something's clean, that Webster tells us that it's free of dirt and marks and unwanted matter. But how do we know? We know it by looking at it, by feeling it, by smelling it. If it's shiny or if it has stuff on it, that's how we determine that it's not clean, right? And so we want to live in the cleanest environment possible within our homes, especially now. I know that things are starting to get a little bit better with COVID, but it's still a very real concern for many of us. And we're probably doing more cleaning than we used to do. So with all the cleaning products that we have and most households use, each household contains an average of about 62 toxic chemicals. And that's an alarming number, in my opinion, especially if your household has children or animals in it that may not know that these things are dangerous. These are the worst offenders. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's things like phthalates and triclosan and ammonia and chlorine. And these are names that we know. These chemicals can cause a lot of potential problems. They're carcinogens. They are endocrine disruptors. They help to create and exacerbate antibiotic resistance. Triclosan, I'm looking at you. They can cause damage to our lungs, our kidneys, and other internal organs. Some of these, just by spraying them, and when we breathe, they can actually cause burns and damage to our nasal cavities, to our esophagus, to our lungs. They can also damage the environment. So they're not necessarily doing damage in our homes to us, but getting into the environment, they can actually have really bad impacts on algae, which is an important part of the ecosystem to help to capture carbon and create oxygen, which we all find very important, right? So these are some of the worst things that can be found in air fresheners, antibacterial soaps, multi-purpose cleaners, drain openers. All of these things, eventually a lot of these products are going to run down the sink and are going to end up in our water supply. So there's a lot of reasons why we want to make sure that we are limiting our use of these products where we can. All right, so let's talk options. Scouring scrubs. I know it's an important thing for cleaning a lot of our hard surfaces, our bathtubs, our kitchen sinks, and the ones that are most common often have bleach in them. That means ammonia and chlorine and lots of terrible stuff. But we can make a really easy and inexpensive scouring scrub with just 3 simple ingredients. Most of us probably already have baking soda and salt in our homes. Borax can be found at most grocery stores. I found it at Target. The 20 meal team borax is in lots of locations. It's not terribly expensive and it can go a really long way. So it's just mixing 2 parts borax with 1 part baking soda and 1 part salt. So you can do this in any quantity. If you just want to do your bathtub, you could do a couple of tablespoons of borax, 1 tablespoon baking soda, 1 tablespoon salt, single use, you're good to go. Sprinkle it on. If you have some stains, you can make a paste out of it and let it sit on the stain for a little bit and then just scrub with a scrub brush. It works really well. I've used this on so many occasions and it's such a simple recipe to throw together. The salt helps to work as the scouring. The baking soda has some antibacterial properties that are not artificial, so they're not going to help to like really enhance that antibacterial resistance, or yes. So this is a great recipe and super simple. So you don't have to do tons of measuring. You can make it in a small batch or a large batch, which I really like. It's nice depending on how much space you have, right? And that you can just put into a container. You could reuse a glass jar, you could put it into a plastic container. Any of those will work for that. Glass cleaner. So Windex is surprisingly bad for us. This is actually one of those ones that when you inhale it, it can burn your insides. And so having an alternative to using glass cleaner, and 2 things that we probably also have at our homes: water and vinegar. You mix equal parts, you spray it, and if you use a newspaper, you can actually reduce a lot of the streaks when you're wiping down your glass and mirror surfaces. So super simple recipe. All you need is a spray bottle, and that's something we can reuse, right? So if we did have some glass cleaner, when that's gone, give our bottle a rinse, we can reuse that for our homemade glass cleaner in the future. All-purpose cleaner. Again, something that many of us are probably using more of in the last year, getting all those surfaces as clean as we can. This one is, again, things we have at home: water, white vinegar, and baking soda. If you want to add additional antibacterial properties, you could use some tea tree oil. It also has a nice scent. If you want it to smell lemon fresh, just use some essential oil lemon drops and add up to 10 of those in. Mix it up. Make sure you're putting the vinegar, then the water, essential oils if you're using them, and then the baking soda at the end so that you don't have a volcano. We want to make sure that we are not being wasteful and don't have extra messes to clean up, right? So you go ahead and put those into a spray bottle. You can spray it on pretty much any surface, wipe with a clean cloth. It's a pretty simple recipe and really nice to have that versatility where you can have something that is just water, vinegar, and baking soda, or you could put those optional essential oils in for extra cleaning properties. And then also sometimes it's just nice to have a lemon fresh smelling kitchen, right? All right, so toilet bowl cleaners. This is another one that has lots of chlorine and those types of ingredients in it. We're putting it in the toilet bowl, which is going straight into the water system. So where we can eliminate some of that, I think it's an important option for us to look at. So this is with 3 very familiar ingredients: borax, vinegar, and baking soda. It is a 1/4 cup of borax and a 1/4 cup of baking soda with 1 cup of vinegar. You mix them all into a container. You go ahead and pour those in the toilet, mix it with your toilet brush a little bit, let it sit for a half an hour, scrub it, and you're done. All there is to it. It's a fairly simple process. And again, these 3 very similar ingredients to a lot of the cleaning products. All right, now floor cleaners. Floor cleaners have always been the one that has been the most difficult for me because I don't want to have to double mop the floor. I want to be able to just mop the floor, let it dry, and be done with it. But unfortunately, with some floor cleaner homemade recipes, there's so much soap in them that you have to mop and then you have to rinse. And so you have like this extra process to go through. Some people may enjoy that. I want it to be as simple as I can make it. So this one is going to make a big batch that you're going to then add to your mop bucket. So it's a cup of water, 1/2 cup of unscented Castile soap. Again, Dr. Bronner's is a really popular one. You can find it in lots of places, including most grocery stores and Target, probably Walmart. And it's super concentrated. So the 1 bottle usually goes a pretty long way. And this one also calls for using pine and cypress essential oils. You could substitute those for different things, for lemon if you wanted to do a lemon fresh one, but this one is modeled after a pine saw. So you're going to mix all of those together in a reusable bottle. And then when you're ready to mop, for every gallon of hot water you're putting in your mop bucket, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of this floor cleaner. Give it a mix. Mop the floor, let it dry, and you are good to go. There's no need to rinse this one. It works on most floor types. So hardwood, laminate, tile, vinyl, ceramic, all the different kinds of floors, which is really nice to just have one cleaner that you can use on all of your floors and don't have to rinse, in my opinion, at least. So this one, you're going to make a larger amount ahead of time and then use it as you need it. And so, but it's a good recipe. All right, so those are the examples I have. I've also provided a handout with these recipes on it that you'll get later. But let's think about when we have to purchase some of those household hazardous waste products. We already have one of these things that we've talked about in our cabinet, but we've decided we don't want to use that product anymore. We do need to make sure that we are disposing of them properly. Many communities will have a collection event once or twice a year. I know that up in Glencoe, they're doing one next weekend, that they're accepting materials that will be disposed of properly. They have to go to a special landfill facility. But there are 3 locations that take these materials, these products from all Illinois residents. So you don't have to be a Chicago resident or a Naperville resident to be able to utilize these facilities. There's one in Chicago. They also do accept some computers. I would recommend calling in advance to make sure that they'll take the specific item that you need to dispose of. There's one in Naperville. There's one up in Rockford. And so I know that the Naperville one always has weekend hours, which is important for a lot of us to be able to get to the facility. But these are their phone numbers, their addresses, and this information is also available. The flyer actually that you can see on the slide is another one of the handouts you'll get. You can also find that on our Cook County IL.gov website in our Department of Environment and Sustainability. All right. I doubled up on this slide. This one's just easier to read. All right, so another option for helping to really enhance the sustainability within our county is to take our Conserve Cook County Pledge. If you go to cookcountyil.gov/conservecook, we have a pledge and a bunch of different resources that can help us to make more sustainable decisions for our households. So that could be everything from, as our light bulbs run out, we change them with LEDs, or it could be reducing how much water we're using, reducing the amount of plastic that we're generating, plastic waste, lots of different information. And we encourage everybody here in Cook to check that out for some valuable information. Additionally, there are some resources here. The Illinois Extension, Chicago Botanic Gardens, and the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition have tons of information, very specific, answer your questions about a specific issue you may or may not have with composting. There's the information for them. And then we also have a Green Guide library on our website. That is a lot of content, a lot of information about reducing our waste in our homes. It's everything from recycling the right way to composting to getting rid of our household hazardous waste and medications and sharps properly so that we can conserve landfill space, because we are rapidly running out here in our area. Also, we have Twitter that I try to post important information to at Cook Enviro, and my email address if you have any questions for me. So if you have any questions, now is our time.
I have a question.
Excellent.
So I have a composting bin. It's on the ground. I've had it for years and I occasionally turn it. So now I learned I need to be turning it more. But I've been told various things, and I'll be the first one to say, like, I have not researched this, so I don't really know, but I've been told certain things like you can add a whole egg in it as long as you puncture a hole in the shell so it doesn't like explode into it from pressure inside there. And here you mentioned not adding just the shells, the empty shells. So I'm curious about that, if you know that. I was also told that you should never add onions or seeds. Now, you know, sometimes when you're cutting your vegetables or other you're seeding stuff, and that just kind of gets shoved into that compost bowl that you take outside. So I was curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that the biggest concern with, like, we'll start with seeds. So putting the seeds in, they might germinate. You might have plants growing in your compost bin. So you just want to keep an eye on that. But if you're turning it regularly, you're really keeping an eye on that. I mean, you could put an avocado pit in there, but it's going to take a really long time to decompose. So just kind of making your choices. And as you're keeping an eye on it, if you notice some plants are growing, like maybe not putting any more seeds in for a while, pull the plants and, you know, cut it and incorporate back into your compost. I think that you have to decide the level of vigilance that you are comfortable with and are able and willing, your household is able and willing to participate in. So if that means putting seeds from your bell peppers into your compost bin, you're composting. That's great. We need to find a balance here, right? It always comes down to balance. I am not sure about the onions. I don't know if that might be from a high acidity or what that is. So I'm very sorry, I don't have an answer about that. But I bet the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition does. So that might be something I need to look into for future reference. And also, yeah, just making a regular routine for how you're caring for your compost bin is going to make it the most successful for you, because if it's not making any progress, like why bother, right? So, but again, it's about balance. So however much works for you and your family, that's what you do. I'm a big advocate of that. Like, we have a lot of things that are competing for our attention and our time and our effort. And so making sure that we're committing to what we're comfortable with, that we have time for. But that doesn't mean that your compost won't eventually be successful. This is going to take a really long time. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this. Did we have any other questions? I can put my email address in here.